Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Congressman, good morning to you.
Dude, how do the Cubbies look?
Oh, telling you, man, spring training was outstanding. For all the Cub fans out there who are fired up about the season coming up, you have every reason to be.
Man, I've been down there once before, and it's an exciting time, and you miss summer because it feels like summer down there.
It really does. I like to think of it as, what you guys would call a fact-finding mission.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's a good one.
Want to see what the slugging percentages are, what the ERAs are going to look like. It's all fact-finding. It's all business-related.
You have to ensure that the pina coladas are still cold in March.
Right. If I didn't do it, who would?
That's right. I'm glad. I'm proud of you.
I knew you would be. A couple of things to talk about. First off, you got an op-ed in, not an op-ed, actually, just an editorial take in Fox News. It's for the U.S. to lead on Syria. Failure to act is failure by all of us. Read your column. I think you make some very, very fine points.
Well, thanks. The bottom line is I actually was in Israel when this all kind of started. And I remember I was up in the Golan Heights and we were looking down and into Syria, and our guide's kind of like, there's some civil disturbances, and our biggest concern is that, Bashar al-Assad's going to try to create some problem with us here in Israel to try to rally his base. We just didn't know, how bad it was going to get. And it's 500,000 people are dead, 50,000 of which are children. And, when we talk about defeating terrorists, one of the things that you have to do to defeat terrorism is defeat the conditions that terrorism thrives in. And, what is it that drives somebody? You can look at, areas of high crime in the United States, too. What is it that drives somebody to join an extremist group, whether it's like ISIS or whether it's, even an American gang? And the answer is hopelessness and poverty and no opportunity. And so when you have this really terrible situation in Syria and people fear for their lives every day, and they're looking for an alternative to destroying the guy that's been holding this family down, for 50 years between him and his father, when the West doesn't act, people turn to terrorism. And lastly, the thing I think that's important, too, is even beyond, what the whole tragedy in Syria is, what's even worse is the fact that, chemical weapons are still being used. And we have to, as a society, say that there is no place for chemical weapons on the battlefield or anywhere, and there needs to be a cost enacted upon anybody that uses them. And the president was right to do this almost a year ago now, but chemical weapons have been used since, and I think it's essential that President Trump grounds Assad's Air Force and makes it clear that there's going to be a high cost to pay.
What do you say to people who say, well, Syria, that's all part of that whole Middle East problem and all that? What's that have to do with what's going on with us? And the answer might surprise you.
Yeah, I respectfully tell people that they need to really actually study foreign policy a little more. And I don't mean that pejoratively. It's just, what is it that has brought problems around the world to reach out and touch us? And it's us ignoring situations around the world in the first place. Look, the world is jealous of who we are. Terrorism doesn't hate us because we have troops in the Middle East. To be honest with you, they don't even care if we have troops in the Middle East. They hate the United States of America because Muslims can live here. And they can live here they can live here free. Because Jews can live here, because Christians can live here, because I can talk about my faith in Jesus Christ. That's why they hate us, because they think that any place that doesn't preach their version of Sharia law, by definition of their religion, has to be destroyed. So when we ignore Syria, when we ignore the Middle East, when we say, quote, bring the boys home and build the bridges here, it's a great line. It works in politics. And I wish I believed it because it would make running for re-election easier because I could just say that every time. But the reality of it is, I want to make sure that if I have kids someday, that they don't have to fight the same war that I've fought since 2003, and making sure that people have the hope and opportunity is the best way to do it.
Speaking of wars, not hot ones, but cold ones, it seems that the cold one has really gotten a bit frigid between us and Russia, and now a whole bunch of other people in Russia with the new sanctions that were announced.
Yeah, very proud of the president for doing this, and it amazes me that no matter what he does, the left will still hate it. And so he announces sanctions. As we all know, this was mandated by Congress as a result of the election meddling. The Treasury, we were getting some inside scoop that this was going to happen, but that, Treasury had to make sure they were doing it the right way. And putting sanctions in place is not just as easy as signing a bill and it's done. There's some real kind of surgical strikes you have to do to it. But I'm very proud of the president for doing it, for saying, basically the naysayers that think somehow he's in bed with Russia. No, the reality is this is a president that is doing what he needs to do, gets the sanctions in order. And also, let's keep in mind what Russia just did. They just used chemical weapons in our best allies' home territory in the United Kingdom. So this is not a Russia that is the old friend under Yeltsin. This is the new Russia. But have no doubt, if you ever fear that Russia's our equal, they're not. They're definitely a failing economy, failing country, and they have a military that's just not near as capable as ours. Thoughts on the transition for Secretary of State? I'm actually pretty excited about it. I know Mike Pompeo. I sat next to him for 6 years on the Energy and Commerce Committee. He and I are actually pretty good friends. And I've always thought he'd be a great Secretary of State. He fakes. Look, I of course, would not have opinions if I didn't think they were right. He thinks a lot like I do on foreign policy, so I think he's good. Look, I admire Tillerson's service to his country, and I thank him for his service, but I always kind of got the feeling like he was just a little behind world events. Like he didn't quite necessarily know what was going on certain issues. He probably did just a fine job, but we need somebody that's going to be out there, be out front. And by the way, Rand Paul coming out, look, he's got a right as a senator, but coming out and threatening to sink the nomination of Mike Pompeo, get a life, dude. Just let the president have his people. And, we've got Democrats we got to fight out here. It's bad enough, so it's always even tougher when you're fighting people that just want to get attention in your own party. Well, that and jumping on right off the bat, your first female nominee for director of the CIA, you're going to pull the plug on that one just as quickly as possible, too. Yeah, it's unbelievable. I don't know her well, but I know that she's out of the operations part of the CIA, and we usually have kind of the leaders of the CIA are analysts. Nothing against analysts, but it's good to get some of the operations folks in. The first female, this lady sounds like a kind of an iron strong person to me, and I'd really love to see her as the head of the CIA. But, if Rand Paul wants to get his attention and get all over the news and throw a hissy fit like he does when anything happens, right? He can do it, but I think we'll get this done. He just likes to insert himself in every debate and act holier than thou. That's just his shtick. And hopefully that's over and done with for the time being, and we'll let these things play out the way they're supposed to. Amen. Hey, before I let you go, the Tax Cuts and the Jobs Act and the impact on Illinois been pretty darn interesting. Yeah, it's been huge. The thing holding Illinois back isn't the tax cuts we just did. It's Springfield, and this is why we got to make sure we maintain the governorship and win some seats in the state house, state senate. That's why I've given a ton of money to do that. Look, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act have had a huge impact. People are going back to work. Part of the issue we have, though, is a mismatch of what the needs versus what the skills people possess are. And that's one of the things I want to be focused on in the next term out here is how do we match people, especially those that are in the age of 50, that lost their last job and now need to learn a new skill set to go back to work. How do we get them the job training they need? The answer is not all in the federal government, by the way. There's a lot of good things happening in the Rockford area regarding that. Hey, I know we're short on time, but before we go and before people go and start, punching names and ballots and all that, any information you want to pass along? Yeah, look, it's been an honor to do the job. It's a tough job, and I'm asking for your vote to do it again. And I'd love to have your vote on Tuesday, or if you vote early, I'm going to vote early because we're going to be in session on Tuesday. Would love to have your vote. Electadam.com is the website. If you're interested in what's going on in my daily life, it's just Adam Kinzinger and Instagram.